A couple of days ago, we talked about that closed-door security cabinet meeting, where Defense Minister Israel Katz reportedly said that Israel is rushing toward a clash on the Syrian border, and that there are forces on the Syrian side actively seeking a confrontation. It was obvious that this leak from the closed session wasn't accidental at all. It was a controlled message, a way to send a warning across the border. We know what you're planning. Don't be surprised by our reaction. Damascus immediately responded, "It's not us. We're ready to deal with any force hostile to Israel. We're not looking for war." And so on in that spirit. And then, just a couple of days later, Israeli troops in Syria walked straight into an ambush near the border. Many soldiers were wounded. Thankfully, no one was killed, and about 12 terrorists were eliminated. This became a very clear illustration of what we were talking about. In the border area, you have multiple armed groups and factions, and quite a few of them are actively trying to heat things up and push toward escalation. These are people who don't care about any agreements, don't care about Giuliani or anyone else. They have one idea in their heads: fight, fight, jihad, and nothing beyond that. Before we begin, a quick note. I don't show my face, and the voice you're hearing is altered, not for drama, but for safety. Let's just say that when you spend enough time around certain intelligence circles, you learn that anonymity is a form of armor. This channel isn't funded by governments, organizations, or donors. There are no sponsors behind me, no outside agenda. It exists solely for one purpose: to give you clear, unfiltered analysis of what's actually happening behind the headlines. Who I am doesn't matter. The information does. So let's get into today's brief. All of this happened last night, from Thursday to Friday, November 28th, in a village called Beit Jin in southwest Syria, on the eastern slopes of Mount Hermon. Hermon has several peaks. Historically, one was Syrian and one Israeli, and after the collapse of Assad's control, Israel took over the entire ridge and all its offshoots, fully controlling the area. The incident took place within what is essentially the buffer zone. Beit Jin is a village of about 5,000 people with a mixed population: Druze, Sunni Muslims, and even some Christians. There, a radical Islamist group called Jamaat Islamiyah has been operating. It grew out of the chaos of the Syrian civil war. One of Giuliani's problems is that he wants to rebuild Syria as a single state, but during the civil war, the country fragmented in a monstrous way. You could have one Arab village where half the houses are controlled by one militia, say, Lions of Islam, and the other half by a rival group, Tigers of Islam. Both fight Assad's forces. They fight the Kurds. They fight each other. In short, everyone is fighting everyone. Trying to bring all of this into some kind of order is a nightmare. Within the area Israel controls, Israeli forces are trying to impose some structure. The buffer zone itself is a network of fortified outposts spread along the border. Each has artillery and air support within range. Between them, mobile patrols move constantly. According to intelligence, 2 specific militants in Beit Jin were preparing an attack against Israeli troops, so a force was sent in to arrest them. The soldiers entered the house, arrested the suspects, and on the way out, walked into a close-range ambush. A fierce, point-blank firefight broke out. 13 Israeli soldiers were wounded, 3 of them seriously, 2 officers, and 1 reservist from the 55th Reserve Brigade Hod HaHanit, which is currently deployed in the Syrian buffer zone. The other 10 were likely wounded. Air support was called in immediately. Helicopters and drones arrived. Artillery shelled the outskirts of the village to prevent reinforcements from reaching the area. In the end, the terrorists were killed, 14 dead on their side. Predictably, Their propaganda claims they were all civilians, women and children, pregnant journalists, and so on. But in reality, these were armed fighters. The wounded Israeli soldiers were evacuated, and, importantly, the detainees were also extracted and handed over to Shin Bet for interrogation. This all happened very early in the morning. During the withdrawal, the force had to abandon an open Hummer Jeep. A short time later, it was destroyed from the air to make sure it didn't fall into terrorist hands. After that, the troops left Beit Jin and pulled back to their positions in the buffer zone. There were no Israeli fatalities, but the incident is significant and is being widely discussed. It clearly shows that the border area is far from calm, that Julani does not control everything the way he claims, and that there are still plenty of local Islamist radicals who are itching to fight Israel. All of this forces Israel to maintain constant preventive maintenance in that sector. The same kind of preventative work that is now being done in Judea and Samaria, only on a smaller scale. Israeli military intelligence, AMAN, is clearly very active there at the moment, building human networks, collecting information, mapping out who is planning what. Apparently, that's how they learned some terrorists were preparing an attack and launched the arrest operation that turned into this local but heavy clash. Katz is absolutely right in one sense. Syria remains a genuinely threatened front. But Israel currently has several advantages there. The IDF is prepared and deployed for that scenario. Forces and capabilities, from artillery to air power, are already in place. And there is a buffer zone, which makes it much harder for armed groups to suddenly appear inside Israeli communities on the Golan Heights. Damascus has again started talking about, let's sign a peace deal and you give us back the Golan. But the Israeli position is straightforward. A full peace agreement is possible in principle. Israel is ready to pull back to the 1974 lines, but the Golan Heights themselves are not on the table. Now, if we move a little north, something similar is happening in Lebanon. Israeli jets have been striking there regularly, sometimes in very heavy waves, against Hezbollah targets. A reasonable question arises. What is there left to bomb? The problem is that intelligence keeps uncovering new Hezbollah assets, and only now is the full scale of their infrastructure becoming clear. Yes, a lot has been destroyed in southern Lebanon, but there is plenty further north, beyond the Litani River, in the Bekaa Valley, around Beirut, and in other regions. You find a civilian house, and inside it a rocket launcher. That house is demolished. You identify a warehouse, and inside it weapons, which are destroyed. You uncover underground bunkers. There was a case about a year ago when a local earthquake of magnitude 4 was recorded in northern Israel. No one understood at first what it was. Later, it turned out that the IDF had found a heavily fortified underground Hezbollah complex just across the border and used around 100 tons of explosives to collapse it. Seismographs picked it up as a quake. That gives you a sense of the scale. Iran, meanwhile, is trying hard to rebuild Hezbollah's capabilities, including through a kind of informal cash transfer network. One of my colleagues described how tens of millions of dollars are moved via Islamic charitable and financial structures. For example, money is deposited in the UAE, where Iranian funds aren't heavily sanctioned, and later withdrawn in Lebanon through affiliated organizations. So Israel is watching Lebanon very closely. As was said recently, today we're discussing the possibility of a war with Lebanon, but it's entirely realistic that in some near future episode we'll already be discussing an ongoing war. Before we move on to Judea and Samaria, there was another odd event related to Syria. 13 Israeli activists broke through the border fence, damaged barriers and gates, and crossed into Syrian territory, declaring they were going to found a settlement there. It's not the first time we see this kind of mindset. Some of the same circles talk about founding settlements in Lebanon as well. Add to that ultra-Orthodox groups periodically trying to sneak into Lebanon to visit the grave of a revered rabbi. It's chaos. The problem is that the buffer zone on the Syrian side includes local villages with residents who are not all friendly Druze. There are plenty of people who could easily kidnap, kill, or disappear an Israeli, which would then become the army's problem to resolve. All 13 were eventually detained, brought to Katsrin, the main city near the Syrian border, and handed over to the police. Criminal charges may follow for illegal border crossing and damage to security infrastructure. Under Israeli law, illegal crossings into Syria or Lebanon are punishable by up to 4 years in prison. In practice, it's unlikely anyone will actually get that. Lawyers will argue about precedents with Druze crossing the border and so on. But the bottom line is simple. It's not just irresponsible, it's genuinely dangerous, and the army already has more than enough to deal with without having to chase after people playing settlers in Syria. Now to Judea and Samaria, where a large-scale IDF operation is underway, codenamed 5 Stones. It covers 5 major population centers, primarily in the Jenin area. 3 brigades are involved: the Samaria Brigade, the Ephraim Brigade, and the Commando Brigade, which includes several special forces units. The goal is to locate and destroy terrorist infrastructure. On November 24th to 25th, 2 highly wanted terrorists were killed. Sultan al-Ghani, who murdered residents of an Israeli settlement in 2024, and Abdel Raouf Chatier, from a clan long tied to terrorism, who shot 2 Kafir Brigade soldiers at a checkpoint in May 2024. Chatier tried to resist. He was surrounded in Nablus. The IDF activated the pressure cooker protocol, used anti-tank rockets to demolish the building, and killed him as well. Families of the murdered Israelis were notified that the killers had been eliminated. At this moment, according to the IDF, there are no remaining most wanted terrorists with blood on their hands in Judea and Samaria. The last 5 were targeted one by one. The final 2 were eliminated in this operation. Security officials are saying that the situation on the ground is changing rapidly, and that this is part of a broader shift across the Middle East. This operation is taking place in a much more favorable environment for Israeli forces than similar actions in the past 15 years, including 2 years of the current war. In previous years, every operation in a Palestinian city would immediately spark mass riots. The army had to set up 2 security perimeters, use crowd control measures, deal with live fire coming from within the crowd. In Nablus, for example, extended urban battles became routine. To arrest a single suspect, you needed at least a battalion-level operation with armored vehicles and heavy fire. Now it's noticeably calmer, because the undergrowth of armed groups has been heavily thinned out. The lawn mowing approach, continuous targeted operations, has started to pay off. Before October 7th, the IDF operated there very cautiously and sparingly. That was state policy. Don't go in unless absolutely necessary. As a result, in Nablus, the Lion's Den group emerged, a gang that not only attacked Israelis, but also extorted and terrorized local Palestinians. When the group was eventually dismantled, many Palestinian residents reportedly felt relief. It was a bunch of young, uncontrolled gunmen who didn't respect elders or any authority. Looking back from today, that pre-war operation now seems far too limited in scope. After October 7th, everything changed. The army boosted its presence in Judea and Samaria, began using armor and air power on a scale unseen there for a quarter century, including fighter jets and drones. Rules of engagement were tightened. If someone fires at soldiers, the response is immediate and lethal, without long debates. This restored deterrence, or as some prefer to say, not just deterrence, but fear. Palestinians realized that the time between a decision to eliminate a threat and the strike itself had shrunk dramatically. Restrictions on where the IDF could operate have also been lifted. Previously, Area A, formerly under Palestinian Authority control, was entered only in exceptional cases. Now operations can be conducted wherever necessary. The result is that the overall security situation has improved significantly. In Jenin, for example, the army carried out several large raids, killed many militants, seized huge stocks of weapons, and, crucially, established a permanent presence. There are now IDF bases in and around the refugee camp, and soldiers are there on a regular basis. That alone changes the atmosphere dramatically. Soldiers can literally go for a run inside the camp, something that would have been unthinkable a couple of years ago. What continues to cause trouble is arms smuggling from Jordan and Egypt. This problem has finally been recognized at the political level, and action is being taken. The area along the Egyptian border has been declared a closed military zone. It used to be swarmed with smuggling drones, and now the IDF is testing ways to counter them. Along the Jordanian border, a divisional-level deployment is being put in place instead of just a territorial brigade, to tighten control over a frontier that is 300-plus kilometers long, most of it on land, with previously very modest barriers. For Iran, this border is a dream route straight into the Palestinian territories, and Tehran is constantly looking for ways to exploit it. There will be no real peace in the foreseeable future. Let's be honest about that. But Israel is slowly reconfiguring the balance of power in its favor on several fronts at once: Syria, Lebanon, Judea, and Samaria. The lawn mowing tactic, constant pressure on terrorist infrastructure, zero tolerance for organized armed groups, is once again proving effective. It doesn't solve the conflict, but it significantly reduces the immediate threat to Israeli civilians. And that, for now, is the strategic goal. If you value independent analysis, not slogans, not spin, then help this video break through the noise. Hit the like button, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and drop even a short comment. It tells the algorithm this content matters. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because nothing here is sponsored, and this channel exists solely thanks to you. Stay sharp, and I'll see you in the next one.